This video is made possible thanks to the support of my patrons. If you want to support the channel and get access to exclusive perks like our Discord chat and the latest live streams and latest updates, go check out my Patreon. The link is in the description box. Okay, picture this. You at the beach, just coming out of the water, you feel a light breeze on your wet skin, hurry back to your towel, lay down, and the sun starts warming up your body. The sensation is absolutely lovely. You can feel your muscle relaxing, your eyes are closed, you let yourself go, and suddenly you feel sand on your face. You sit up and see a kid running to the water, shouting at their sibling. They just ruined the vibe, let's be honest. It makes you hate that kid. And not just that kid, all kids. And their parents too. You hate them so much you'd honestly pay just not to be around them. Well, that's it, friend. There you have it. The no kid zones. Whether it's a quiet cafe, a luxury resort, or even sudden flights, no kid zones are becoming more common. Some businesses have had kid-free policies for years, especially in places like South Korea and Southeast Asia. This is the clearest example of explicitly designated child-free zones. In South Korea, cafes, restaurants, museums, even libraries, particularly on Jeju Island, started rolling out no-kid zone policies around the early 2010s, usually excluding children under a certain age. Someone even created an actual map to find those places. I mean, look at this. And this is Jeju Island. It's crazy. But the trend really started picking up in the last few years for a few reasons. First, more young adults are choosing not to have kids, or they're waiting longer to start families. That means there's a growing crowd of people looking for calm, adult-only spaces, whether it's to enjoy a nice meal or just not here crying on a 12-hour flight. Second, businesses are paying attention. If customers want peaceful, child-free environments, companies are happy to offer them, even emphasize that need, and then cash in. And finally, there's the internet.
Let's be rational. We are in a fucking tin can with a baby in a goddamn echo chamber, and you want to talk to me about being fucking okay?
Every time a story goes viral about a toddler meltdown at a restaurant or a screaming baby on a plane, the discourse is unleashed. Should all spaces be family-friendly, or is it okay to have places just for adults? Now, whether you love the idea or hate it, no-kid zones are part of a bigger conversation about how we manage public spaces, who they're made for, and why. I want to talk about that today. My name's Alice, welcome back to my channel. Part 1. Who are the annoying kids? I want to explore different aspects of this question, and I want to start by being specific about which kids we're actually talking about. I worked as a tennis instructor during my studies, so I interacted with hundreds of kids and parents, and it's easy to spot patterns between the kind of environment in which the kid evolves at home and the behavior on the tennis court. We had kids from all sorts of social backgrounds. Our fees weren't too expensive, which was great because that meant that posh kids who are culturally incentivized to play tennis actually ended up playing alongside working class kids we convinced to join thanks to the low fees. So yeah, a mix of backgrounds, and I remember this one single mother who came to me when lessons started in September. She told me her kid was a bit hard to manage but wanted to try and see if tennis could work for him. She already felt super sorry about it, and we reassured her that it would be okay, it would be fine. Now, I'm not gonna lie, her kid needed a lot of attention, but it was a challenge I was happy to take because honestly, the boy was really thoughtful and kind. Now, a few parents would stay for the whole lesson, and I remember catching those knowing looks from them, like, my kid's not like that, right? I mean, obviously your kid's not like that. If you've got the time to stay for the full hour, chances are your kid is already getting a lot of attention and care at home. You can't expect the same from a single mother. Judging other people's parenting is one of the most universal things we do. We all do it, no matter our age or whether we actually have kids ourselves. I do too, but honestly, our judgments are usually pretty unfair. You know, the parents who stayed the whole time were usually stay-at-home parents, teachers, or retired people. They had more flexible schedules. Middle-class and upper-class kids were often dropped by car because their families lived in bigger houses with big gardens outside the village. Meanwhile, the parents of working-class kids rarely came. Their kids would come and go on their own since they lived in smaller houses within the village. You see, single-parent households or working-class families don't have the same resources as middle or upper-class families. Yet we often judge kids without really considering those family circumstances. And I'm not saying that middle-class kids are always well-behaved, and that working-class kids always misbehave, because that's not true. What is true, though, is that there is a correlation between someone's economic capital and the quality of care and education they can provide to their children. If we don't recognize those inequalities, we end up criticizing the same people over and over again. Let's take one example, the single working-class mother. The single working-class mother has historically been the recipient of a lot of criticism because she's an easy target. On TV and in the media, she's often labeled as the welfare queen. This is more common in the US and usually targets black working-class women. In the UK, some people use the derogatory term chav mum, often aimed at white working-class women. Using those terms says more about the person saying them than the person they're aimed at. They are acts of social differentiation. They make the accuser feel morally and culturally superior. It's a way to assert social distance, but also social dominance. The second reason our judgments are unfair is visibility. Visibility plays a huge role. You have to think about who is visible in public spaces and why. Some families simply exist more in public than others. Let's say if you own a car, if you live in a big house, if you have a babysitter or access to childcare, then your child is mostly outside of public scrutiny. You can manage their behavior and emotions privately or with the help of specialized staff. On the other hand, families who don't own a car, live in cramped housing, can't afford babysitters, and don't have access to childcare, well, those families have to navigate public spaces more, and that means they have to manage their kids publicly under everyone's watchful eye. It's worth keeping that in mind the next time we catch ourselves judging another family's parenting style. Now, what's funny about the holiday season is that everyone's kids are out, shouting, crying, eating sand, or suddenly vanishing into a crowd. And actually, most of the discourse online about no kid zone rather refer to places like restaurants, beaches, bars, not necessarily public transport. So people mostly don't want to see kids in places where they're already paying for an experience. Part 2, child-free lifestyle. Most of the articles and opinion pieces I've read on the no kid zone often connect them back to child-free living. The people writing those pieces usually live in big city centers where it's more common to find folks who are child-free, either by choice or due to external constraints. Big cities are becoming less and less kid-friendly because they're simply way too expensive. Hanging around in the city with kids is basically like saying, I'm rich and I flex it. So the whole no kid zone conversation plays out very differently in big cities. Parents already feel like their kids aren't welcome. And then on top of that, they see no kid zones popping up. Like, great, thanks. There's frustration on both sides. Parents who just want their kids to have a lovely childhood in the city, and child-free people who also want to live their lifestyle in peace in spaces designed for them. And while no kid zones are popping up in response to those frustrations, I don't see much being done to actually help parents raising kids in cities. Soon we won't even need no kid zones anymore because families will be completely gone. And that's not a good thing. A city is like an ecosystem. It needs social diversity to survive long term. So while it's fine to have places that are adults only, like, don't get me wrong, the child-free lifestyle is a minority lifestyle. They're not about to take over the world. It's also important to make public spaces and third places more accessible for parents and their kids. So in those situations, I like to look at what progressive organizations do because they often pioneer ideas that get picked up later by bigger institutions, politicians, or governments. Take the 1960s, for example. When the feminist movement was growing, feminist groups wanted to make sure everyone could participate in events and conferences, so they provided on-site childcare. For example, at the first National Women's Liberation Conference in Oxford, over 600 activists attended, including around 40 children. And guess what? An on-site creche was staffed and run by male volunteers, allowing mothers full participation. While researching this video, I found the collective Bulle in Paris has been offering something similar, childcare for parents who want to join protests or strikes. It lets parents be parents and still take part in society, share their experience as parents, and take advantage of their rights as citizens, in this case, French citizens doing their patriotic duty of going on strike at least twice a year. Okay, now I want to move to, let's say, the more serious part of this conversation. Part 3, protect the kids. You know, I love to tell you my little French anecdotes. They're the motivation behind a lot of the videos that I make. So this anecdote involves one of the most popular TV hosts in French television history. His name is Patrick Sébastien. He used to be the host of Le Plus Grand Cabaret du Monde, which me and my family used to watch religiously. And in the past few years, he, like many other old guys in the arts and TV, became super reactionary, like unnecessarily reactionary. You see what I mean? So anyway, recently he was hosting a little show at a family-friendly campsite. He was singing on stage and he invited a bunch of women to join him. They danced with him, and then one of the women touched his super inappropriate, I know. Later on, he went back to that woman, turned his back to the audience, and unzipped his pants, pretending she was giving him a Again, not appropriate at all, especially with kids in the audience. Parents complained, the media picked up the story, and the campsite's reps apologized, saying it was completely unacceptable, not planned, and not in line with the site's values. Now, there's one bit of the story that I did not mention. This wasn't a regular campsite, it was a naturist one. So, as the story spread online, some people started raising a different question. Should kids even be allowed at naturist campsites? A friend of mine sent me an Instagram post from a feminist creator who focuses on violence against children, and it really sparked the conversation. The post was even liked by France's biggest feminist organization, so it's not just a random take. In that post, the creator argued that children shouldn't be allowed at naturist campsites. First, because it's not good for their psychological development, and second, because it could expose them to the risk of violence. Now, I can't speak too much on the first point because I'm not an expert in child psychosexual development, but I do find it weird to automatically conflate nudity with sexuality. From what I've read, the sexualization of naked bodies is partly biological, but mostly cultural. Some cultures in Europe are just more open about nudity. There are communities that live naked much of the time and they're not more sexually active because of it. Even what we find arousing changes across cultures and time. Victorian England, for example, thought ankles were scandalous. And look at this portrait of Louis XIV showing off his scarf. Whew. This remark extends to the second claim that the threat of SV is more prominent in naturist camps. When I read that, I immediately thought back to the research I did for my video on Protect the Kids, which you didn't watch because YouTube didn't recommend it to you and you're too lazy to check your subscription section. I know, I'm lazy too, so I'm not gonna complain too much, and also that allows me to reuse some of the things I said in that. But please, turn on your notification, do something. I'm not gonna keep explaining the same thing again and again. Anyway, one of the key points I made in that video, which I think is really relevant here, is something I call the safety freedom... I don't know how to pronounce this word. Gauche. The safety freedom gauge says that more safety often comes at the cost of freedom and vice versa. More freedom comes at the cost of safety. If you present as a woman, this probably feels familiar. As women, we're told that our freedom to be in public spaces at night comes at the cost of our safety. So if we want to be safer, we're expected to give up on the freedom to stay out late. That same idea applies to children. The threat of SV is real for kids, and the safety freedom gauge shapes their lives too. Another example would be the threat of SUVs or the police in black and brown communities. In response to those constant threats, parents have become more and more protective. You know, all those dangers have something in common. They're ever present. Kids are the victims and adults are the perpetrators. Because of how adults behave, children end up having to give up more and more of their freedom. And here's my worry. That our fear of something bad happening to kids lead us to remove them from more and more spaces. That post I shared earlier is an extreme example, a naturist camp. Most people, when they see it, have a common sense reaction like, yeah, of course, kids shouldn't be around naked adults. But the basis of that reaction is worth thinking about. Like, what actually is a safe place for kids? Is a school safe? Is a church safe? In the post I shared earlier, the person explained that a naturist campsite facilitates SV because it's there, it's readily available. And I find this explanation deeply problematic. It's basically the same logic as blaming women for wearing short skirts or being out late at night. We know, and feminists have been repeating this for decades, that SV has nothing to do with how someone is dressed. That line of thinking is a slippery slope that always leads to victim blaming. In that case, it is done indirectly, through the parent. Just to make it clear, SV is about dominance. It's about violating someone's bodily autonomy. It happens everywhere, and it's committed by all types of people. To say we should ban kids from naturist camps because they're more likely to be harmed there is reactionary. It distracts from the real issue. And just to be clear, I'm not dismissing the fact that terrible things may have happened to children in those places. I'm sure they have, and it's awful. But spotlighting specific communities when we know that SV is universal, that's problematic. That's what conservatives do, you know? They highlight stories that reinforce their worldview, whether it's about migrant communities, the trans community, and decades ago it was all gay communities. Solving the issue of SV towards children doesn't work by banning them from every place that seems unsafe. Sadly, the risk is everywhere, mostly at home if we look at the statistics, but also in public. And I think the best resistance is to keep living, despite that risk. Because if we don't, then what? In the comments under that post, I even saw people saying kids should be banned from bars because there's alcohol and it's bad for them. Like, where does this stop? It just confirms my feeling that the initial argument was reactionary because it responds to a real problem by restricting freedom. It's reactionary because it reinforces the idea that children must be controlled at all times, that adults decide what is right and wrong for them, and that children don't have a say. Yes, we want to keep children safe, and in some cases, we absolutely should step in. But I also want to think about the downside of constantly over-controlling them. You see, if a child keeps getting shown that they can't make their own decisions, that their needs and desires are always filtered through adults' authority, then how are they supposed to know when someone's mistreating them? How are they supposed to say no? To say, this is my body, I have control over it, you don't get access to it. I think it's so important that kids learn that they are a self, that they have bodily autonomy. I want little kids to be able to say no and to be respected for it, rather than just being removed from more and more spaces just to protect them. Conclusion. We really have to think about all of this when we talk about no-kid zones. I get it. In enclosed spaces like public transports or restaurants, having kids running around and crying all the time is annoying. I've been there, I felt frustrated as well, I get it. But at the end of the day, those little individuals are going to grow up and they'll need to know how to manage their emotions and how to move through public spaces with other people. That's inevitable, and they learn by being in those situations. We already saw how lockdowns and social isolation messed up with kids' development. Do we really want to encourage more of that? And also, kids remind us of what it's like to have fun. We adults have spent decades being shaped by disciplinary structures, schools, workplaces, etc. And then you have to add the gendered expectations. Girls stay quiet and smile, men stay serious and never cry. Children remind us how joyful life can be when we're not weighted down by all of those constraints. Another anecdote. The other day, for example, I saw a little girl burp really loudly on the bus, and yeah, I laughed. But I wouldn't do that, especially not as an adult woman. It would come across as super unladylike. But I've seen plenty of guys burp in public, and no one bats an eye. I'm not saying women should start burping on the bus, we've got bigger issues to deal with, but you get my point. Kids are a reminder of all the constraints we put on ourselves and how nonsensical some of them are. It's no wonder that the phrase reconnecting with your inner child has become shorthand for finding your true self. It's about peeling off the layers we've built up to survive pressure, trauma, and expectation. We shape ourselves in response to all of that. So I think it'd be amazing if we saw children not as annoyances, but as an opportunity to question the things in society that push us further away from who we really are. I'll end the video here on a positive note. I hope that's okay with you. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like so I know I can keep going with this little series. I think I have all the videos on similar topics that I want to cover. Now I'd like to say a big thank you to my patrons for their support. A special thank to top tier patrons: Ron Wing, Fred, Hongqing Wang, Paul-Louis Agenot, Wolf Gratz, Patrick Button, Jeff Lee, Yilan, Tyre Matin, Nick, Brandon, Jem Settle, Ojuel, Pablo, Patrick, Boris, Ria, Corey G, Tristan, Christopher, Ian, Donage, Manuel, Christopher France, and Perry. And thank you to the other ones who prefer to stay anonymous. That's for me. That's it for today. And yeah, I'll see you very soon. Salut!